three of whom are here. First of all, our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. I also have with me the Minister of Sustainable Development, Energy, Public Services, Dr. Julia Fletcher. Our candidate for Castries South, Dr. Ernest Hilaire. And in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by the Minister for Commerce and the candidate for Rosalie, Ms. Emma Hippolyte. I propose to proceed in this manner. First of all, I will share with you our economic program for the country. And I intend to preface my remarks by commenting and responding to the statements made by the leader of the United Workers' Party on the issue of VAT and the sales tax. Once I've done that, then I will give you a sense of my own thinking of where the economy is, what we need to do, and the program that our party has in mind. Once I've completed that process, hopefully maybe in 20, 30 minutes, maybe more, I am then going to invite our individual ministers to chat with you maybe for a maximum of 10 minutes. Philip will chat with you about our program for catalyzing the economy through investment in infrastructure. Ernest today will be wearing several hats. He'll be deputizing for long. He's going to talk a bit about tourism and investment. Emma, as I said earlier on, will chat with you about our program for the business sector. And then Dr. Fletcher has a very unique task of trying to wrap up the odd ends on key issues that we have missed. But there is a portfolio that is dear to his heart, alternative energy. And he's going to spend some time on talking about those issues. Assuming that I chat with you for about 30 minutes and we give each of them 10 minutes, then we are talking about an hour and 10 minutes, and then you'll be invited to ask any questions, to raise any issues. No holds barred. Nothing is sacred. And you are free to raise any issue with us. Not just about the campaign and the issues thrown up by the campaign, but any other matter that you think is sufficiently important that you require some kind of explanation. So once again, on behalf of the St. Lucia Labour Party, welcome, and I thank you for joining us this morning as we proceed to explore the various options that are available to us in this forthcoming general election. I want to take as my starting point the comments made by Mrs. Shastny in respect of the replacement and or reduction of value-added tax. I accept that the versions presented by him have varied. On some occasions, he speaks of a reduction in value-added tax followed by abolition of value-added tax. Then on other occasions, he speaks exclusively of reduction, but he started off by saying that the revenue lost will be replaced by creative measures. Those measures were never clarified or stated, but in more recent times, it appears that they have come down to a replacement of value-added tax by a sales tax. That has now been narrowed a little more, and there's talk now of a sales tax of 8%. The first thing that I want to clarify on this issue is this. It is absolutely incorrect to suggest that the total revenue collected by the government of St. Lucia from value-added tax is $150 million. That's simply untrue. In fact, the total amount of money collected by the government of St. Lucia from the value-added tax as of the end of the financial year 2015 is $346.37 million. Of that amount, the Customs Department collects on international trade $162.5 million, and the Inland Revenue Department collects $183.87 million. So that any attempt to reduce or to replace VAT has to deal with this fundamental and overriding issue. How are you going to generate that amount of revenue to pay for government services and to pay for your debt? But more of that a little later. I think it's important that we clarify the differences between VAT and a sales tax. That we need to understand exactly what the differences are and what the implications are for the business sector. Because, as in all things, this appears to be a seductive proposal. But the question is, even if it is a seductive proposal, what are the consequences of that proposal? You would know by now that VAT is a broad-based multi-stage tax, meaning that the base of VAT includes, for example, a very wide cross-section of the economy. That is goods and services. And you have to remember now that the St. Lucian economy is dominated by services. Roughly 75% of this economy is in services. Therefore, and really that is the first issue. If you are going to introduce a sales tax, and bear in mind that the sales tax comes at the end of the retail process, and obviously before, when inputs are being purchased, the reality is that a sales tax will therefore exclude the services sector of this economy. And this is one of the main reasons why all these Caribbean countries introduced VAT, because they knew that revenue was not being collected from the services sector of the economy. In other words, the moment you say that, you are setting up yourself to undermine the revenue base of the country. Of course, I accept that business people do not always appreciate being held accountable. One of the good things about tax credits will only be awarded if there's proof VAT was paid at some point. The sales tax does not have that feature. And it would mean that the government of St. Lucia would have to employ a greater amount of resources to ensure compliance with the sales tax. You will have to employ an army of people. But the beautiful thing about VAT is that it has this inbuilt capacity along the way to monitor the production process up to the sale process. While, of course, a sales tax is a much simpler, and one might say, I'm tempted to opt for a more straightforward and less administratively burdensome form of taxation, the fact of the matter is that its capacity to attract evasion is so huge that whatever mechanism we put in place to manage our input and output VAT far outweigh what seems to be an attractive advantage. I don't have to repeat to you the superior nature of VAT over any other type of taxation. There are now over 140 countries in the world with VAT, and it is exceedingly rare for a country to abandon VAT in favor of a sales tax. I know of very, very few countries that would do so. If St. Lucia therefore had to eliminate VAT without a credible alternative form of revenue, then you have to take and bear in mind the consequences of this to our investors. This country has been through a difficult period. A few years ago, investors were reluctant to purchase government instruments. They were scared stiff that the government of St. Lucia would not have been able to meet their obligations. What we saw in the first months of office was a hemorrhaging, an unwillingness of investors to roll over previous investment. That's the first consequence, because they feared that the economic fundamentals of the country were not sound, especially because we had a very high deficit. You remember, I inherited a deficit of 9.6% of GDP. What this meant for us was that we had to turn to short-term borrowing. And even where investors who had $10 million, $15 million invested in the country, they said, listen, even if we are willing to invest in your country, we will no longer invest for 10 years. We can only agree to a year or to 2 years. Why? Because they were scared that the bottom will fall out of the St. Lucian economy. But we persevered. We made adjustments. We inspired confidence, and finally, in the past 18 months, we are beginning to see a return to confidence and of persons investing in our country. I want you, without prejudice, just think for a moment. Think. If this country decides for one reason or other that it is going to abandon VAT, then the question is, what would these investors feel or think about this economy? Will they feel secure about it? And will they be prepared to invest? I said earlier on that we collect about $346.4 million from VAT in the last 2 years. In economic terms, VAT will represent roughly about 35.2% of our current revenue. When therefore you decide you're going to remove VAT, then you have to block that hole. You have to find alternatives, because whether we like it or not, VAT is the single largest source of revenue for our country. And the question is, if you remove it, whether you're going to create a financial crisis. I want to say to you this morning that I believe, without a doubt in my mind, and I've thought about this a lot, that if the United Workers' Party proceeds on the path that they're recommending to the electorate, and I accept that there are political parties who make pronouncements, that there's a thing called political fraud, and then when they get in office, they do something else. I accept that. There's evidence of it all over the place. But I want to make the point that if they proceed in the direction, then this country is going to experience a fiscal shock of such severity that at the end of the day, we will have to look for alternatives. You may think I'm exaggerating, but let us look at his proposal and see the consequences. For every 1% of VAT you reduce, you're losing approximately $7 million in revenue. If you reduce it by 2%, you're losing 14. If you remove it, reduce it by 3%, then we're talking about a gap of $21 million. And I want you to bear the back of your mind that we have not really reached a point where we are balancing our budget. We're still borrowing for services. But he proposes that he is going to grant an amnesty on the property tax front for 3 years. Currently, we are raising $10 million in property tax per year, finally. It means, therefore, that for each year you are not collecting property tax, you add that to whatever reduction that you get in VAT, then you have to find another couple $1 million. So let us say, for argument's sake, that the proposal is to reduce VAT by 3% from 15% to 12%, because that seems to be the end thing for some people. You're losing 21 million. You're losing 10 million for property tax. That takes you up to 31 million. Then on top of that, you're also saying you want to reduce vehicle licenses by 50%. Philip will probably give you the figure, but I assume that will be reduced by another 3 million. That is a shock in 1 year. Add to this the shock that will come from a sales tax itself, because a sales tax at 8% can never conceivably provide you with the revenue that you need. I am the last person in the world to suggest that VAT, like any other taxation system, is perfect. We had teething problems with VAT. And no country I know does not have teething problems with VAT. All have had. But I think we have ironed out a lot of these problems, and we have built confidence in the administration of VAT. And then recently we made a policy adjustment. We increased the VAT threshold from $180,000 to $400,000. That recent adjustment has removed at least some 600 registered entities from collecting VAT. So that we have always been committed incrementally to deal with any issues arising from the administration of VAT. It is true that we have had a difficult 4 years. That is true. No one has denied that. Any country having a fiscal deficit of 9.3% must be difficult. But the point is, we corrected it. And today, St. Lucia has a fiscal deficit of 3.1% of GDP. That's what is attracting investors once again to this country. Because they feel that they can trust the St. Lucian economy. Therefore, it is absolutely essential that we do not be tempted to implement revenue measures that will weaken or erode even further the revenue base of the country while driving up expenditure. You need to be exceedingly careful, because as long as you are going to implement measures that will drive up expenditure, reduce your revenue base, then know for sure your deficit widens and you're back trying to borrow. And the question is whether in this economic environment that you can borrow and borrow safely. We do have a serious debt situation on our hands. Containing that debt is an issue. Our current debt portfolio is climbing and is approaching 80% of GDP. And in the past few years, yes, we have had to borrow somewhat to be able to meet the cost of providing services and to cope with our short-term debt portfolio. Incidentally, just to complete the picture, I made a point a while ago that you couldn't borrow now with long-term instruments. You can't get anybody lending you money for 10 years, 15 years anymore. We have had to change our approach, and what the government has had to do is to begin to invest heavily in short-term instruments, treasury bills. And so, for example, currently, we have a short-term debt portfolio of about $360 million. Whatever we do, therefore, we have to bear in mind what the consequences will be for those persons who hold government instruments. I'm not frightening anybody. I have no interest in frightening anybody. All I want you to do is to reflect and think carefully of the consequences of the options that are placed before you. We do, of course, have to continue some of the work we are doing. We have to continue to focus on reforming the business environment to make it easier for both new and existing investors to conduct business in our country. And together we have labored over that in the last couple of years. We also have to intensify our approach and our efforts in competitiveness and productivity, and I think that is going very, very, very well. And this government has never ever disagreed with conceding to the private sector a greater role in this economy. We are a government who have pioneered. Examples: we are the government that's created the bold projects in this country where we allow the private sector to invest, to build, and we enter in agreements with them to lease. That is now a preferred business. When we started that many years ago, there were those who had doubts about it, but it worked. In fact, strange enough, sometime this year we now claim ownership of the Ministry of Infrastructure over in the ministry managed by Philip J. Pierre Jr. What are we doing about the airport in the South? Our position has always been, with such a high debt portfolio, approaching 80%, you can't go and borrow another $150 million to construct an airport. It means that your debt portfolio is going to climb at least to 95% of GDP, and you're approaching 100. That's what it means. And that is why we have adopted an approach for our PPP, which I'm sure Philip will touch on when he speaks. Again, I don't want to engage in trying to scare you, because I only want you to think about it. We are taking the generosity of other countries for granted. Somehow, in the back of our minds, we believe that countries are always going to come to our rescue. The largest donor source of funds that we get for development comes from the European Union, not from the United States, not from any country in the Middle East, not from Canada, but from the European Union. What are we asking these countries to do? We are asking them to allow us to implement sales tax for whatever flight of fantasy we may have, but at the same time to subsidize our way of life because we don't want to make the sacrifices for our own economy. These are the same countries who repeatedly say to us that we must put our fiscal houses in order. You need to be aware of the expenditure pressures that St. Lucia will face in the next 5 years. In fact, if you look at the program of the United Workers' Party, where they're saying they're going to increase social expenditure, they say they're going to increase spending on subsidies for transport, as if that is an issue now, because the government of St. Lucia has rationalized that, or increased subsidies on providing children at school with food, something that we have worked steadily on over the last couple of years. But we are going to experience major expenditure pressures in respect of universal health care. We have a broken justice system. You hear the complaints. We have to fix it. It means additional expenditure to fix it. We have had a period of adjustment, and we have had to introduce a range of social safety nets to calm the waters, ease the pain of our people, and then we got a major challenge to upgrade our infrastructure. We therefore obviously have to engage in policy measures that will enhance growth while preserving government's revenue and not undermining the revenue base of the country. Then he tells you, that is the leader of the opposition, that he will double St. Lucia's GDP in 10 years. I've heard that before. I've heard that kind of undertaking before. Now, anybody looking at economic growth and the statistics of economic growth would know that if you have to double St. Lucia's GDP in 10 years, then you'd have to look at an annual growth rate of 7% every year over 10 years. How realistic really is that? The last time that St. Lucia ever enjoyed a 7% growth rate for its economy was in 2004, when we embarked on policies to enhance preparation for Cricket World Cup. Even in 2006, 2007, when we were sent into purgatory by the electorate, the growth rate was less than 7%. Those are the two crowning years. And the crowning years, because there were unique circumstances at play. This takes me back to the fundamental question. If you are going to play with changing the taxation system of St. Lucia in such dramatic form, administratively, what kind of upheaval are you going to be causing? That is number one. And how long can we entertain administrative and revenue dislocations to this economy, given its fragility? That, I think, has to weigh heavily in your own mind. And I maintain that if your plan is, as you say, to stop all borrowing, granted amnesty for property tax, 3 years, 10 million each year, and on top of that, on top of all of those things, reduce, of course, the little income you get from licenses. How then do they really plan to manage this country? Do they really plan to pay civil servants, pay for services, pay for teachers, pay for doctors? That's the fundamental question that all of us have to face and all of us have to answer. Against that background now, and having shared those points with you, and I leave you with this little point, nugget or otherwise, that your sales tax, never forget, that with a sales tax, that you pay tax at two ends. When you purchase your inputs and at the retail end. The beauty about VAT is this, that in the entire production process is taken into consideration, and a business entity is fully entitled to claim the input VAT that it has incurred across the production process. And ask yourselves whether VAT is as disastrous as he says, and since VAT is levied both on goods and services, then are we to say that with an economy of 75% in services, that no taxation will apply to that sector? I want now to explore briefly with you some of our proposals for the economy in the coming months or proposals which we have made to the electorate. We believe that we have to maintain our stance of fiscal prudence. We believe that there must not be excesses. We believe that we must drive this economy through investment. We believe, too, that in the next couple of years we must drive this economy with massive investment in infrastructure, with the private sector being the principal entity. First, we propose to go through with recommendations that we announced in a budget, but which we were unable to implement this last year because of the usual administrative problems, but with some changes. Number one, we're going to increase the tax threshold to $30,000, which means that anybody earning a salary of $2,500 will not be eligible for the payment of taxation. We will have to refine some of the deductions that apply to taxation, but every single individual in this country will now be able to claim a higher deduction rate of $30,000. Number two, there's a promise I made to the private sector. We were not able to come through with it, and that I admit without any hesitation or difficulty, but we will do so now. That is to begin to reduce corporate tax and to drive investment. We want to do it in two stages. And I believe that we can do it now because profitability is returning to the corporate sector. I think a lot of the companies that went through that difficult patch had to do a lot of write-offs. And the books are suggesting that profitability is now returning to many of these companies. And so we think that the economy is ready for that deduction in corporate tax, and our plan is to proceed by way of reducing corporate tax in two stages. Stage one, down to 28%, and stage two, eventually down to 25% after the adjustments have been made. The second plank of this government's approach is significant infrastructural investments to drive down unemployment. Whether we want to admit it or not, investment has returned to this country for the first time in the last 8 to 9 years. And it has always taken a government of the Labour Party to craft the incentives that businesses require. The most progressive legislation to attract investment in this country has always been done, pardon me, and this is not engaging in self-congratulatory statements, but I'm merely referring to the historical fact, has always taken a Labour Party government. Why do I say that? Tourism Stimulus Investment Bill, which recently we made adjustments to, that allows many hotels to tap into it. Then, of course, we have introduced the CIP, and I'm sure that Ernest will speak a little more about it later. But what I can tell you is this. Apart from the new hotel, that is the Royalton, that is being constructed in the North Harbour Club, we are seeing for the first time a new hotel in the South. And I know some of you may not believe me and say, this is election season. He's going to say anything to woo us. Well, the developers have paid for the land. The cash, the check is in the treasury. They've got all their plans. But only recently we signed a further agreement with a grouping called Range. And that grouping has agreed that they will proceed to construct a major hotel on the Black Bay lands. The very same lands that we had to buy back from the bank, the receivers of the bank that collapsed from the previous agreement to build the Ritz-Carlton. And they're paying cash for that land as well. And we have had a good year from our private sector. They have struggled, But by and large, they are now reinvesting. I don't have to remind you of courts. I don't have to remind you of Diana. I don't have to remind you with what is taking place in construction. And two things have happened to underpin this new buoyancy. One, the dramatic increase in construction in the country, and secondly, the return of profitability to manufacturing, and we have seen a significant increase in exports. Philip will speak intensely about infrastructure, but just to underpin my point that we are moving in the direction of adjusting taxation, because we believe that the more money we put in the pockets of people for disposable income, the better it is for this economy. We have to move more and more to a system of indirect taxation, because VAT thrives on indirect taxation. That's the beauty of VAT. People get the money, they spend it. So that has always been our approach, to ease personal income tax, put more money in the pockets of consumers, and of course, they handle their disposable income as they wish. But that is not enough to take us through. Our infrastructure program will include the north-south link road linking Groseley to Denver. Some of you again may say, well, that's another fanciful idea. He's been talking about that for some time. Yes, I have been. All politicians are entitled to their dreams. I have mine too. And we are getting closer to that reality, because the report from the Caribbean Development Bank on the feasibility of that road is nearing completion. And the best news that the Caribbean has received in recent years was the announcement by the British government that will make available £300 million to Caribbean governments to be administered by the CDP. St. Lucia's share of that is £30 million. And our government intends to utilize that £30 million once we satisfy the criteria to put towards the construction of that north-south link highway, and we will complete the finance of it, hopefully, with funds coming from the CIP. The Millennium Highway that you see there is going to be rehabilitated. I've already announced to you the plan to rehabilitate a range of primary and secondary roads to pave the way for the construction of the completion of the new highway from Shock. We have obtained the financing for that. You know, we are constructing a new water supply redevelopment project in the valleys in Denring, establishing new treatment plants in Deriso. There's a new water supply project in the south. The John Compton Dam is under rehabilitation. The Castries water treatment project is moving apace. And then, of course, there are things like a diagnostic facility to support agricultural development. But three large major projects stand out for us apart from that highway. One, I told you earlier, the new judicial complex. We have moved to acquire the lands on the Millennium Highway. You're going to ask me how we're going to finance it and build it, because it's going to cost over $100 million. This one, we are going to go by way of a bolt agreement. The private sector will drive it. They will be invited to finance it. And already there are private sector entities lining up to do so. The second is we have to bring some new relief to our police officers. They have been complaining for a very long time, and we have decided that this term will see a new police headquarters at Shock. And a project too that is dear to my heart, and I'm anxious to complete a process we started to provide a home for our artists. They've been crying a long time. We started in a modest way by reconstructing the home of our Nobel laureate, Derek Walcott. But we have now identified land overlooking Mega J at Shock for a new theater complex, and the drawings for that have been prepared by the Taiwanese. So, these are some of the major projects, and I'm certain that Philip will address it even more. We do not think that at this time the approach is to grant any amnesty on property tax. I have never got a sense that even though I may have my own personal issues with property tax, that our people are opposed to paying property tax. The problem they've always had is the provision of services in the communities. They feel if they pay property tax, then they should be provided with services. But this is what we did. Collecting tax is a complex issue, and we need to avoid harassing people over the collection of tax. That's one of the problems with taxation. Sometimes it can be harassing. So what we did, we exempted all persons with homes of $200,000 from the payment of tax, ease the burden on the more vulnerable in the society, and that has worked very well. But to ensure that there was balance and fairness, the exemption we gave to the poor, we then applied it as an exemption to those who are better off, and they can claim that as a deduction on the amount identified for the payment of property tax. That has worked well. And I plan that we increase that by an additional $100,000 to $300,000. So that if at the end of the day you were assessed to property tax on a value of $500,000, then what you do is that you deduct $300,000 from that amount of $500,000. I will stop here for the moment, except to clinch one major point. This economy needs investment and needs investment badly. We have made a start because we have inspired confidence in this economy. We want, through the CDP, to be able to attract investment of at least $3.5 billion to drive this economy. Again, you're going to look at me and say, wishful thinking? My answer is no. If already you're going to have a hotel in Sabushah, in Swaziland, at $200 million US, then you know it's within reach and it is within grasp. And that's what I'm sure Ernest will talk about a little later. We have had to introduce some far-reaching and dramatic legislation to spur investment. The latest, of course, is the amendments to the Tourism Stimulus Incentives Bill, the creation of this government, to finally allow some ease with respect to alcohol, purchase of alcohol and food at hotels. This is not an easy decision, especially as the hotel sector enjoys a lower VAT rate to the rest of the public. But these are risks that we have to take because we need investment to drive down unemployment to avoid a social catastrophe in this country. A government has to be concerned about peace and stability. No country can develop if there is constant warfare and constant conflict. That is why sometimes I try to say to you that we have to invest in these social programs to ensure that we have the vital stability to allow us to do other things in our country, to give us breathing space, to ensure that all our citizens feel that they can benefit in our country. In this environment of high unemployment, it is critical and crucial that we take bold steps. Yes, I've heard him. I've heard the leader of the opposition. He says that these new amendments, quote unquote, are disastrous. In our entire history, we have always linked incentives to investment. That has always been our approach. All the legislation governing the tourism sector has been based on investment, and you provide incentives for investment. We have never believed in just giving away things just like that. We say to you, invest in our country, we will give you generous incentives to do so. That is the bargain. And that is what this amendment is about, and we are using the most efficient method to do so, which of course is a system of tax credits. Yes, there will be some who will debate whether the tax credits go low enough or it should be higher, but whether we are operating a medium-range property, a small property, a large property, the key element of it has to be the investment. That's the key. That is the key. And so, I invite you to scrutinize some of these policies. And with your understanding now, I will say no more because I think I've said enough. And I'm going to invite my colleagues to chat with you for a few minutes, as quickly as possible. And the first person that I think I'm going to invite is Ernest. And then once Ernest is completed, Emma will then come with the issue of business expansion and business development. And then Philip will take the last slot. No, the third slot. Jimmy takes the last slot. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to your questions.
I could never speak with a mic in my hand. And over the last few weeks, I cannot do without a mic in my hand when I speak. So it just shows what being on the political trail can do to you as an individual. Good morning, and let me join the Prime Minister in thanking you for coming out this morning to listen to our proposals for the building of a prosperous St. Lucia, a St. Lucia that we would be proud of constructing for our children and for our grandchildren. And the Prime Minister indicated to you that a major task of a SLP government in the next 5 years would be to attract $3.5 billion in investment. And he indicated that such investment would come through investment in tourism, in infrastructure, in energy, in ICT, and other niche areas. Of course, other colleagues will point out the specifics of some of the other areas. But I want to reiterate a point that the Prime Minister made as it relates to the Citizenship by Investment program. And although the program is still in its infancy, and as you're all aware, a program that faced tremendous opposition and criticism, we have witnessed substantial interest in St. Lucia's CIP. And I can say to you that the unit had attracted over 6 applications for the construction of hotels in St. Lucia. And at the last that I had checked, the government had already approved 3 such hotel projects. The Prime Minister mentioned construction of a hotel in Shabusha, the approval of a hotel in Belvedere in Canaries, and approval of a hotel for construction on the Black Bay lands. There has also been an approval for an extension addition to an existing property in St. Lucia in the north. It has not been made public, so I will not indicate which property it is. And I'm aware that the unit also has 2 other pending applications. Now that has already created an issue for us, because you would recall in the regulations, we had indicated that the maximum number of citizenship we would have awarded would have been 500 per year. And because of the overwhelming demand placed by those applications, one of the first issues the Prime Minister will have to consider is whether or not we review the regulations, because the demands are already way beyond what we had projected for the program. But that is a very good problem to have, because if the interest in your program is so overwhelming, it means that you have to be able to make the adjustments to ensure that you remain relevant. So we are very confident that the CIP will become a major driver of investment in St. Lucia. We've already seen it in terms of hotel development, which for us was one of our main reasons for introducing the CIP. Already there are discussions for other business interests that want to come to St. Lucia and use the CIP. And of course, at the appropriate time, further information can be provided. But we are very confident, based on our assessment of the CIP and other investment proposals, that we can attract $3.5 billion in investment in St. Lucia over the next 5 years. That will substantially change the employment landscape and the business development landscape in St. Lucia. Of course, in our discussions with investors, there are a number of issues that are coming up, and you will see in the manifesto we've sought to address it. One of which is the speed with which we consider and approve investment proposals. And in the manifesto, we've made a proposal to establish an investment delivery and support working group, which basically bring together the key agencies, key stakeholders, for us to find more ways and means of speeding up investment in St. Lucia. There's still too many bureaucratic hurdles, there's still too many challenges faced by investors. And we need to be able to get the public sector to understand, for a business person, for an investor, time is money. And when you're in a competitive environment where investors can consider other islands, you do not want to be stalling applications and discussions, because they can easily go to another island, which is more facilitated. And we need to make that very clear. Time equals money, and therefore, without compromising on our broader developmental objectives in the country, to facilitate investment at a quicker pace. And we believe if we create that environment in the public sector and with stakeholders, we'll be closer to achieving our 3.5 billion target. Another important issue for us in creating a facilitating and enabling environment is for us to have double taxation and bilateral investment agreements in place. Because again, investors are asking, what are your agreements with our home country to ensure that we do not face any challenges as they come to St. Lucia to invest. The Prime Minister made a point about tourism. You all know that tourism has been one of the brightest achievements for the St. Lucia Labour Party government over the last 5 years. Year on year, we've witnessed increases in tourism arrival. And for the first time in our history, we recorded 1 million visitor arrivals in St. Lucia. And if you compare that to 2010, which was the high point of the former administration, we've seen an increase of almost 20% in tourist arrivals in St. Lucia. And that's against a background where there's actually less money provided to the St. Lucia Tourist Board. There was no money paid to pay for airlift, but yet our arrivals continued to increase, which suggests to you that the St. Lucia Labour Party government policy, as it relates to attracting further tourism arrivals, was working and continues to work. However, we need to increase it. The more we discuss with stakeholders and other partners in the industry, they're saying to us now, our biggest challenge in St. Lucia is that we are peaking. We don't have enough rooms in St. Lucia. So there is more interest from airlines to come to St. Lucia. There are more visitors who want to come to St. Lucia, but there are not enough rooms. Now, it's a strange situation to be in, because you would want to argue that there are still hotels that are not 100% occupancy. And that was the first question I asked. When you say that we are peaking, does that mean every hotel is 100%? Of course it does. You will never attain 100% occupancy. But because we are seen as a particular high quality, high level destination, we need to be able to ensure that the demand for St. Lucia for the honeymoon, wedding, and some of those other niche areas, we actually cater to it. And this is why in the CIP, we made it very clear that the hotels we were attracting had to be 5-star hotels, branded, or 5-star boutique hotels, because we were very clear that we wanted to promote St. Lucia as a high-quality destination. So we have a target of increasing by 2020 our bed stock by almost 50%, that we will increase it by a further 2,500 rooms by 2020. That is a very aggressive target, but we believe, based on the initial interest that we have received through the CIP, that we can achieve that target. But at the same time, the Tourist Board is reporting substantial interest in the bed and breakfast sector. A lot of it utilizing rooms that were built in 2006 for Cricket World Cup. And there is such a high level of interest in that area that we believe there is space for us to also increase the capacity of St. Lucia in that area itself. So we will be placing particular emphasis on the bed and breakfast sector, giving it more support, more promotion, and ensuring that we can attract that sector as well as we are seeking to attract the higher level, the higher income earning visitors. It would mean now that we have to strengthen our online marketing and promotion, because a lot of individuals who are actually using the bed and breakfast sector are using online bookings. Of course, you all know of Airbnb and some of those engines that are used now to do those bookings. So we will have to ensure that we strengthen support for online marketing and promotion. And trust me, over the last few weeks, I've learned the power of online marketing and promotion. Some of you have whispered to me that every single day you see me, whenever you put on your computer. It is a powerful tool, and we are very far from exploiting the capacity of online marketing and promotion. And you will see in the next term of the St. Lucia Labour Party government a very focused and determined effort to expand the promotion of St. Lucia using online services. Of course, niche markets are still very important for us. Yachting, wellness, and sports tourism. And last night we announced in a presentation of Manifesto that once the St. Jude Hospital opens, the George Odlum Stadium will be repaired, will be upgraded, and it will be transformed into a sports center. And that sports center will be an attractive facility for sports tourism, where sportsmen of different disciplines can come and actually use it as an international facility. And of course, I had briefly mentioned ELIF, that we will deliberately seek to further increase ELIF. There is considerable interest in St. Lucia by a number of airlines to increase ELIF out of Dallas, Montreal, Fort Lauderdale, and we will ensure, as we expand our bed stock, we will also expand the ELIF that comes into St. Lucia. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Good morning. Well, the Prime Minister, any of the infrastructural projects that we are intending 5 or 4 years. Basically there are 3 main projects. The Hiwanora Airport, which is going to be built on a PPP arrangement. And I just want to go briefly through the process by which we got there. When we came into government, contrary to public opinion, there had been no financing for the Hiwanora Airport. There had been no financing had been agreed to with anybody for the Hiwanora Airport. There was a mixed match of entities, including a company called A&M and a few other companies that had made proposals to the government to get involved in some kind of arrangement. So there were no concrete, and the final nail in the coffin was when a bank, I think is the Douche Bank, said that they could not get involved in financing that project. So there was no confirmed financing for the Hiwanora International Airport in December 2011. We thought, as the Prime Minister said, that 150 million US dollars was too much money to spend at a time when our national debt was rising. So we contacted the World Bank, and they introduced us to a body called the IFC. The IFC received a grant from the government of Canada, and that grant was used to pay for all the preparatory work involved in getting that PPP arrangement together. So we paid nothing, basically, for getting all the arrangements done for that PPP. And where we are at this stage is that we have identified, I don't think I'll go through the whole process. The process was transparent. The bidders came to St. Lucia. All the bidding was done. The opening of the bids was done in the public There were representations from the private sector, etc. So I don't think I need to go into that. I don't think I need to go into that. But what happened is that we are at a stage now where there are two major airport developers who are interested in building our airport on a PPP arrangement. The basis of the arrangement is that the airport is going to be leased for 30 years, and after 30 years, it will be returned to the government of St. Lucia. The government of St. Lucia will manage all the security, etc., custom security, and the private sector will manage the hotel, the shops, etc. So what's happening is that the first stage is going to be a new terminal building. That is the first stage. And we hope that all arrangements will be complete, and by December we should sign, and by February 2017 we should see the construction of the new terminal building. And that is at no cost to the people of St. Lucia, absolutely no cost. So I think that is the first major project that will happen in the next term. The second major project is the Castries Grosley Highway, and as the Prime Minister said, we're going to be developing the secondary roads first. These are all the roads in Corinth and that part of the country. For the simple reason, we need to get these roads done first to avoid the massive congestion that will happen when the shock to Grosley portion of the highway is going to be built. Last week, the tenders board gave an approval for a consultant for the secondary roads. So that has been approved by the Central Tenders Board, and work should start up. So the process has begun. There's going to be a tender for the contractors, etc. The process has begun. All the designs for the secondary roads have been completed by the Ministry of Infrastructure. So hopefully by July, the tenders will go out. So work should start on the secondary roads, possibly at the latest August this year. While the secondary roads are being constructed, and that will entail extensions and widenings and resurfacing of these roads, we are going to be looking at the consultancy for the shock to Grosley portion of the highway. The terms of reference are near completion, and they have to be sent to Kuwait for what is called a no objection, and from Kuwait, when they return, tenders are going to go out. The Kuwaitis insist that they must give a no objection to the contractors and to the terms of reference. The Kuwaitis insist that that must happen because that road is being financed by grants and loans, and the loans are at a very good rate of interest. So the Kuwaitis they want to make sure that everything is transparent and open. Part of the arrangements for the consultancy is that a Kuwaiti firm must be involved with a local firm. So it's going to be an alliance between a Kuwaiti firm and a local firm for the consultancy for the shock to Grosley portion of the highway. Another major infrastructural development is going to be the development of feeder and agricultural roads in the south of the country. Again, that's going to be financed by KFED, and KFED, as you know, is the Kuwaiti fund. And where we are now is that we are just completing the feasibility study for that road. Again, we had to go to Kuwait for an objection. That has come back. The consultant, and in that case, is a local consultant who is working with a Kuwaiti firm. They have completed that feasibility. I just got the report on my desk, and tenders should be out shortly. And these roads span from Viewfort North into Miku. That is the first stage, and it involves development of the feeder roads to feed the agricultural sector. The other major infrastructural development is the construction of two new bridges, the Tamaso Bridge and the Canaries Bridge. These have been financed by the CDB, and then the process has been completed. The contractors are local contractors. The no objection has come from the CDB, and construction on these bridges will start as a maximum 6 to 8 weeks. the whole process has been completed for that. Another development that will interest you is the development of podcastries. I think around the 15th of November 2011, an agreement was signed between the government of St. Lucia through SLP and a cruise company for development of the Castries Harbour. When we came into government, we continued the discussion with them, and these discussions went on until late last year. And we found that there is an unwillingness for that process to go forward. What the government had to do, the government has done, through SLP, has done all what we have to do. We had to form a special purpose vehicle. We had to pledge some lands. We've done all that. We had to speak to the vendors because the vendors would have been displaced. We've done that. In fact, we took the vendors to Jamaica to show them what would happen in the new port development. But that doesn't seem to be happening. So what we've done is we've opened up the market. We've opened up that investment to the market. So anybody, any private sector, persons or companies who are interested in that, for the development of podcastries, is open and ready to go. Because the first arrangement we had hasn't worked because the cruise company has not come to the table before they promised. So it's open for the private sector. But we intend, there is great interest in the development of podcastries, and we hope that we should be able to get a partner to work with SLP for the development of podcastries. These basically are the major developments in the infrastructure ministry for the next term. We will continue with the building of our roads, etc. And the buildings the Prime Minister spoke about the police complex. So these things will continue. And talking about schools, we've begun construction on the Dennery Infant School that's happening through a local contractor. And we're also going to begin construction shortly on the Choiseul Secondary School. The bids are out. I think the bids have been opened. So the construction of Choiseul Secondary School is going to start about August this year. And there are also several other schools that are going to be repaired or renovated under a program called the DVRP, which is a program financed by the World Bank. So it looks like there are quite a few projects that they are not projects that we're dreaming of. The projects that have been financed, the contractors have been chosen in most cases, and we are certain that by the end of this year, all these projects will start and would give a much needed boost to the construction sector, to employment, and basically to the private sector generally. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I recognize the head table. I can leave it down. I can speak to it like this. What's that? So what's that mean? All right. I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, the Deputy, and the other members of the head table. I am very elated to be here this morning at this discussion. And my focus is to speak and to expand on the area of the business community. as the Minister for Commerce, Business Development, Investment and Consumer Affairs, I want to first thank the business community for the environment in which we operated for the 4.5 years. Whether it was the Chamber of Commerce, the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association, SLP, I had some dialogue with the tourist board, but a lot more with the Coalition of Services, for example. We were able to have periodic meetings to discuss the issues impacting that sector and to work together. So during that time, we were able, as a government, to provide subsidy to the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association because we realized they needed to strengthen the secretariat of the SME. We did this about maybe 2.5 years ago, and you could see what has happened with the Manufacturers Association. They are a lot more organized. They have embraced the need for international standards. They have introduced the Manufacturers Awards, and you could see the growth of the businesses that are participating in that sector. During our period as well in office, we established the Coalition of Services. And the Coalition of Services, which is part of grant funding, was to put a structure in place to deal with the services sector. And this organization was formed. It has its own board of directors away from government. We have a representative on the board just to observe what is happening. They conduct their own affairs. But I am happy to report that the Coalition of Services have actually moved from strength to strength. And I want here this morning to recognize the sterling work that Ms. Yvonne God has done in keeping the Coalition of Services together. We also work closely with SLP, the Small Business Association. They too receive a subvention from government. We would like to see a lot more structure within SLP. We would like to see them working a lot closer with us to grow the micro and small business sector. Of late, I know they've got a new executive, and we are hoping to see how best we can improve on this. As a result of the work that we have done in the manufacturing sector, we've seen growth in exports, because one of the key things when we met with them, there was significant pressure from the Manufacturers Association for government to implement Article 164. And Article 164 is a clause in the agreement, the CARICOM agreement, which makes provision, allows a country to use tariff to provide an environment where your manufacturing sector can grow in some of the areas that we're manufacturing. And we adopted that Article 164, and it allowed some of our manufacturers, I must say some manufacturers actually ran with it, while others were a little slow. But those who actually embraced that implementation of that article, now we can see significant growth in them. The adoption of Article 164 and the incentives that the Honorable Prime Minister raised before, the incentives to the business sector, we saw companies like Dibole Bottling modernizing their plants, and now have moved, the export has grown, and recently they have now embraced the entire OECS market. About 2 weeks ago, the Dibole Bottling received the manufacturer of the year for the Caribbean. We have not come out because we are in the peak of elections. You've not heard much of it. But that is telling you how we focus government policy and support that our businesses are making progress. As it relates to, again, to manufacturing, we had the Baron Foods, and working with us, they are on the international market, but working together with us at the ministry and with the Trade Export Promotion Agency, we made significant progress and penetrated the Cuban market. That is good for us because with Baron Foods, there are about 5 other manufacturers that are knocking on the Cuban door. And only this week, Monday I think it was, only this week, I was able again to meet with a delegation that arrived here from Cuba, focused on getting attention to bringing in these 5 other manufacturers onto the Cuban market. Now, so these are some of the things that we have done, and how do we address some of the issues that are still plaguing our business community? You know, one of the key issues to us is the whole issue of efficiency and effectiveness. And you have all heard of the Ease of Doing Business report. There were certain issues that we needed to address, issues such as insolvency, issues such as the establishment of a credit bureau, the whole issue of embracing technology to revolutionize the way we do business. And in our manifesto, we have addressed that on, I'm not certain that you've seen our manifesto or have received it, but you should receive it soon. On page 14, between pages 14 to 17, we have addressed this. And on page 14, and I'm reading from the manifesto now, your Labour government will establish a unit responsible for the administration of insolvency proceedings and introduce required legislation to govern reorganization procedures. So that's a commitment that we are making going forward. 2, establishment of the credit bureau. Now, as the chair of the Doing Business report, we had an arrangement with the private sector, that private sector through the Chamber of Commerce would be driving the creation of the credit bureau. But here we gave a commitment, we will facilitate the establishment of private credit bureaus by developing the legal and regulatory framework necessary for that. As I said, one of the key issues for us as well is the whole issue of the use of technology in moving forward. When you speak to some of our small businesses, they speak about a reduction in sales, a reduction in markets. But one of the key things that we knew was impacting that is that our consumers sometimes appear to be more sophisticated than our business persons. They are moving ahead of you. And when I speak to my staff and people around, most people are shopping online. And we felt it was necessary to provide an incentive to businesses so that we can promote e-commerce. And I'm reading now from the manifesto. We will provide incentives to encourage local businesses to adopt e-commerce, which can grow their businesses both locally and internationally. We have, within the Ministry of Commerce, we have the responsibility for the Secretariat for the e-commerce policy that has been adopted by the St. Lucia Labour Party government. The issue of adoption of international standards, most of you would know that we have the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, and again I want to commend Mrs. Walcott, Dr. Walcott, for the significant and tremendous work that is being done at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. And here we said, your Labour government will facilitate the adoption of international quality standards by local businesses, which will improve their competitiveness. And why are we saying so? Because when we speak to some of the smaller manufacturers, they are always complaining about the cost of doing this quality audit, because there's a cost to it. And because they have not done the quality audit, then they cannot implement and make the changes that are required in the businesses for them to meet international standards. So there, as a government, we are saying we are going to give you incentives to cause you to embrace international standards. And it is only when you embrace international standards that you can truly penetrate international markets. You must embrace standards first. And that is important. And those of you who have been working with us, especially in the area of the poultry industry, would know that this was a challenge when we attempted to deal with the poultry farmers as it relates to their sale. And when we started talking to the members of the Chamber of Commerce in terms of pushing local chicken, they raised the issue of quality and standards. And I must tell you that we have started. I'm pleased that the poultry, the association, the members went into the Bureau of Standards finally and sat down to put a plan of action together to bring that sector and let them embrace international standards. This is important for us because we are of the view that our poultry sector cannot grow without the help of the tourism sector. I'm very firm on that. Without the help, we need the help of the tourism sector to be able to use our local chicken and other products. And consequently, the issue of embracing standards will become critical for the tourism sector to use that. And consequently, we have started that process, and I'm hoping that with our second term, our next term, the distributors, which is the members of the Chamber of Commerce, the tourism sector, and others will come together to cause that to happen. I think PM raised the issue of the double taxation, and I know Ernest spoke a little on it. But one of the things I must tell you that within the CARICOM agreement, we are all members of CARICOM, but within that sector, what we are seeing is that some of the companies, some of the countries have moved away, and in addition to being a member in the common market, they have signed bilateral agreements. For example, Trinidad and Tobago is a member of CARICOM, but they have signed bilateral agreements with the Dominican Republic. They have gone and signed it with Costa Rica, and that is impacting our local manufacturers here. That is impacting our local manufacturers here. So this is an area we need to work on to ensure that we to ensure that we have an even playing field. We are going to see what agreements we too have to sign as to allow us to have stronger negotiating power. One of the areas I want to, on page 15 of the manifesto, and I'm reading, your Labour government will support the growth of domestic investment by strengthening business development support services. Now, within the ministry, we have the three agencies. We have the Trade Export Promotion Agency, that is the main responsibility is to focus on getting external markets and to assist our manufacturers to get their products to the external market. We have the Bureau of Standards focusing on ensuring that we embrace international standards, and we also have Invest St. Lucia, and Ernest has spoken on investment. But when we did, in reviewing our efficiency and how we serve the business community, we did an analysis sometime last year, and in doing the analysis, we saw that there were duplication in some of the services that we provided. Some of the services that we provided within the ministry, some of the services provided by our unit, our Small Business Development Unit, SEDU, and the Trade Export Promotion Agency. And what we have done is to put all of this together and now establish what we call Trade St. Lucia. And this is addressed in the manifesto on page 24. And on page 24 it says, your Labour government will restructure and streamline the Trade Export Promotion Agency and the Small Business Development Center to provide seamless business support to prospective and existing enterprises. And I need to tell you, we've done it. Only about 3 weeks ago, we launched Trade St. Lucia here. So we have a bit of legislation to take place, but the operations have already started. So I think one of the key things for us as well that I want to raise is the focus on our young persons as it relates to entrepreneurship and providing them with the various incentives. And on page 24, to support the establishment of our trade St. Lucia, we have outlined several items that we're going to do. For example, provide greater encouragement to young persons to become entrepreneurs, particularly in the areas of creative industries, information technology, and agriculture. Establish an innovation fund to stimulate and facilitate the patenting of inventions in selected areas and generate viable new business concepts that create employment. Introduce anti-dumping legislation and the corresponding implementation and monitoring capabilities to safeguard local producers and exporters from unfair practices by external competitors. In concluding, I'm talking to the business community, but you know, recently as a government, we looked at the Consumer Protection Bill. I cannot speak to you as business persons without speaking about consumers, because it is the consumers that cause you to make money. And consequently, I am also the minister, so I need to both sides of the coin. We have presented the Consumer Protection Bill, but in that bill, the business community, we have presented lots of guidelines to you as to what are some of the things that you need to do properly so that you protect your consumers as well, and you protect yourself as well as persons who are distributing and selling products on behalf of third parties. The ministry, our next step is to go around the island to meet with you, to have town hall meetings, to explain what is in that piece of legislation. It is important that you know what is in there, and it's important that our consumers know what is in there. So that was a commitment we gave. We have implemented it, and now we are telling you we are going to look at legislation to look at competition so that we have fair competition in this space of solution. So with these viewers, I want to thank you for the support you have provided, and I thank you in advance for your continued support. I thank you.
Thanks, Emma. We cannot running a little late, so I'm not able to take up some of your time. Really, I know as business people, there are a few things that we're very interested in. So, particularly energy. Electricity is a big input for every single one of you, and I know that you are quite keen to know what we're doing about the energy prices and solution. The price of electricity for a domestic consumer is around 38 cents, close to $1. For hotels, it's a little bit more. You're quite interested in seeing how we can bring that price down. I know water is another big issue for you, and I know that's something that you probably would want us to tell you a little bit about. So let me start off with electricity. We've been doing a lot in the area of energy because we want to stop this reliance that our country has on fossil fuels or oil. We're lucky, for the last 18 months, the price of oil has been going down, so we haven't had to pay a lot for electricity. Although, because Musilek was caught in this price hedging, this fuel hedging program, we didn't really get the benefit of the low oil prices until January of this year. But Musilek is not hedging that much anymore, so the price is going on. But we can never tell what's happening on the low oil market. The price is based on going up again, as they seem to suggest. So there is every need for us to give ourselves a buffer from this, and that's why we're pursuing very vigorously this sustainable energy program, where we want to develop our geothermal potential. And what we've seen from the studies that have been done recently using resources from the World Bank and from the New Zealand government is that we probably have somewhere in the vicinity of 72 megawatts of energy potential from our geothermal resource. The good news is not all of that is concentrated in the surface springs. In fact, maybe only 12 megawatts of the 72 is concentrated in the surface springs. The other 60 megawatts is in two discrete patches, one of them almost as far as Newport North. So the good thing for me as Minister of Responsibility for the Environment is that we will not be violating the World Heritage status of the Peter Management area when we drill the geothermal. The other good thing is that the further away we move from subred is the less of a problem we have with the acidity of the resource, which is what has really caused the problems in the past. So we believe that we can get 60 megawatts of geothermal energy from our resource, which is actually our total geothermal, our total energy needs right now. You lose the peak demand for electricity, which it usually experiences around this time of day, between 11 and 1 o'clock, when people have the ACs on and it's so hot. Our geothermal can service all of that. But geothermal takes time. We probably will not be able to develop all of our geothermal before the year 2045, we talk about 60 megawatts. What we can do is probably get 30 megawatts of stream by the year 2030, 2035. So we believe by then we'll be well on the way to meeting from geothermal alone half of our demand for electricity. But we're also doing wind. You've seen the test tower opposite the Water Lake Correctional Facility with an advanced stage there. That will give us 12 megawatts of energy, supplying around over 90,000 homes. And that will give us, again, the stability that we're looking for. 12 megawatts is 20% of our current demand. Lucelec has also floated a request for proposals for a solar farm in Newport. Quite interestingly, 35 companies from the UK, Canada, the US, Latin America, all expressed an interest in bidding for this. So it shows you that there is a significant amount of investor confidence in what we're doing in the energy sector. But that's not the end of renewables. You want to know what you can do or what can you do for your own distribution, your own production of energy. And I know there is a regime in place that really irritates a lot of commercial operators and hotels in particular, because you have a cap of only 25 kilowatts that you put on your roof. That's because there was a pilot project with Lucelec. We know 25 kilowatts is a drop in the bucket. It doesn't do anything for you if you want to do the gardens, Sanders Grand or Bench, any hotel, 25 kilowatts is nothing. We certainly want to move in the direction of expanding that, and we're working with the National Utilities Regulatory Commission. We've also done a study of what the grid can accommodate, and you hopefully will see in the very near future an expansion of that to allow you to invest. But there's other good news. In the manifesto, the government has said that it will remove all the duties and remove the VAT on renewable energy appliances. So hopefully it will allow you to recover your investment. Area of water. Water is a big issue. We are finally able to give Newport, and I know Delhi, Union will be very happy to hear this, new water supply system that will meet the demands of Newport in the year 2033. Funding has been secured from the World Bank. It's a $64 million project, and it will give Newport and Langley a completely new water system. So we can finally allow Newport to live up to its potential of the commercial hub for St. Lucia. And that project has already started, and we hope to see that project completed probably within the space of 18 months. We've also secured funding for the Delhi water project. Again, big problem for Delhi, and that will also serve the needs of Delhi for the next 17 years. Those projects will come online. But we have a serious problem in St. Lucia water storage. We enough waterfalls of St. Lucia, but we don't capture enough of them. So we want to encourage every single household, every community to move into water storage. So we will remove the VAT on water storage tax. And we're also looking into putting these water storage tax on the price of the. Because when we look at the price that the water storage tax will be retailed at, we think that there's still some opportunity to bring price up. So we will be, through the Ministry of Commerce, talking to the retailers of water storage tanks to see how we can bring the prices up to the desilting of the John Compton Dam will start very soon. We had a little hiccup. Two companies put in bids. One company withdrew. The other company that was left knew that they were the only company there, and their bid was $10 million above what we thought was a fair project price. And maybe they thought that because the desilting of the dam was so important to us that we would go with them, and we said no, we will retender. So we've actually gone to retender, and we hopefully by August, September should be able to close that process. And we know that there are a lot of companies interested, and we will undertake the desilting of the dam. The only thing with the desilting of the dam is that it cannot be done in 1 year or 2 years. It has to be a long process. Because you're talking about half of the dam is now silt. So it will be a process that will take place maybe over a period of 5 years. But immediately what we will do is excavate the silt that is immediately abutting the dam itself, so that we'll be able to give ourselves access to that other column of water, which would mean that in the dry period, we would not be too worried about what will happen with water in the north of the island. And the dam, as it is, will be able to serve the north of the island. So that is something that we're quite optimistic about. The other area that we are looking at, I forgot to tell you, with energy, there's also some good news coming. Caribbean Development Bank has just approved a loan that we will not have to put money into our pockets to pay. A loan for us to replace the 21,000 plus high pressure sodium and mercury vapor street lights around the island. That's costing the government $11 million every year in street light costs. When we replace those lights, the price with LED lights, the price to the government solution, the cost to the government solution will be $5 million. So there'll be a savings of $6 million with street lighting. The select is not very happy about it because it's a reduction in their revenue. And they've already threatened that they may need to apply to the National Utilities Regulatory Commission for a change in the tariff because they're losing revenue. No, that's your problem. That's not ours. Our problem is to make sure that the people of St. Lucia pay less and the government of St. Lucia pays less for electricity, and that is the direction that we move in. We hope to be able to complete this process within a 3-year period. And I know because my colleagues, Minister Hippolyte, Minister Pierre, they are very, very concerned about street lighting in their areas. So that project, I believe, is one that will be extremely exciting. The other things that we're doing within the public service to save revenue, we just commissioned a new unified communication system. There are good things about it. There's one thing about it I don't like. It now allows my work phone to follow me wherever I am on my cell phone, so it doesn't matter where I am. That call will get to my cell phone at any time of the day. But it allows for things like video conferencing, teleconferencing. It goes over an internet protocol, so we will not be paying. So once we set up one of these phones in the embassy in New York and the embassy in the High Commission in London, these calls will be free calls because we basically will be doing it over internet protocol. The savings to the government of St. Lucia will be over $2 million a year. You will not believe that since 1999, the government of St. Lucia has been leasing a PBX from Cable and Wireless for over 100, well, it started off at $100,000, now it's $200,000. So over the course of 17 years, we have paid over $30 million to Cable and Wireless for a PBX that we never owned. When I saw that, I said, this is absurd. I mean, $30 million could have paid for PBXs how many times over? So, and then what we found out, but it wasn't just the one PBX, there were a lot of other satellite PBXs in other government departments. So, we installed this one unified communication system, which will allow me to video conference with every single one of my ministerial colleagues, with our embassies, with anyone that has the capability. And we own the system. So it is not, we have stopped all payments to Cable and Wireless or Lime or Flow or whatever, Liberty, whatever they call it right now. We will not be paying them anymore, but we have a system that will allow us to go forward. And again, that's a significant savings to the government. So in public service, water, energy, these are some of the exciting things we're doing. We've put up solar PV panels on some of our government buildings. And the wellness center, the price of what they're paying monthly for electricity has gone on from $28,000 a month to $20,000. At NEMO headquarters, their bill was zero last month. They paid absolutely no money for electricity last month. And we plan on doing that with 10 other government buildings so that we can hopefully zero the cost of electricity for those buildings and then start doing retrofits. I know that one or two people in this room who are very interested in working with us in retrofitting, and we still want to have that discussion. It's just that we wanted the bill to be in place, and I think once the bill is in place, we can move full steam ahead, but we would like to retrofit all of these buildings. So in my ministries, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. There's some of the exciting things we're doing in some of the other sectors. We were good yesterday. We are looking to abolish corporal punishment in schools. I think time has come when we have to stop beating our children. I think that is something that, if a parent wants to beat their child, that's between the parent and the child. But a teacher should not be beating their child in the school system. That's a little bad. There are other ways of disciplining children. So that is something that we will be stopping. There was a big request for a sex offenders registry as a way of at least some pushback against this scourge of sexual violence in St. Lucia, and we will be putting in place a sex offenders registry. You heard the Prime Minister want to speak about the education trust fund, $50 million over 5 years to allow young people from these other countries to get a university education. We are one of the way to Island Lifeline with the ICT centers that we're setting up all over the place. Every single one of them will serve as a Wi-Fi hotspot. Every library in St. Lucia will serve as a Wi-Fi hotspot. That funding has been secured. Every secondary school in St. Lucia will serve as a Wi-Fi hotspot. And for the Taiwanese, we'll be setting up meshes, wireless meshes in those places that do not have access to one of these buildings. So we expect that in the next 2 years, you will not have to move too far from any location in St. Lucia and have access to Wi-Fi. I think, in a nutshell, that covers it. We have copies of the manifesto. We will distribute to you. You will see that there are a lot of plans in there. But one thing I want you to know, many of these plans have started already. So this is not pie in the sky. This is not us saying we'll be doing this to get a vote and we don't know when it will happen, and then 5 years time come back to you and say, well, because of economic circumstances, we won't ever be able to do it. Many of the things in there have already started, or funding has already been secured. And I can sit with you at any point if you're interested in knowing what is the status of these, how many of these have been funded, to let you know where we are with these. Many of the projects also are projects that we believe are necessary to transform this country. For example, grant funding to young people for mobile app development. We should be able to create the next Steve Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezos in St. Lucia. We have children who are very, very talented. All they need is an opportunity, and that is something that our government is very keen on providing. So we want you to work with us as a manifesto said, to continue to build a better St. Lucia. And the only way that could happen, I mean, they didn't bring you here to tell you just about the plans in the St. Lucia they were having. We brought them to tell you that on the 6th of June, we have to watch a vote on the St. Lucia. That's it. So this is not just this is what we're doing and the nice guys, and no, we want you to vote for the St. Lucia Labour Party on the 6th of June. And I think once you read our manifesto, and when you see the beginning of the manifesto, the achievements of the St. Lucia Labour Party over the last 4.5 years, and you heard the Prime Minister speak about how challenging it was over these last 4.5 years. When we were putting together that achievement section, I was shocked at how much we've been able to achieve in so many different areas. Home health for the elderly, empowerment of single mothers, every single sector. Now you see the economy starting to move forward. Construction is moving forward. 2 new hotels. We haven't had any new hotel investment in this country for 5 years between 2006 and 2011. There are 2 new hotels currently being constructed. There are new hotels on the way. You couldn't get to speak about them. You know that they're interested in citizenship and investment. There is so much happening in the agricultural sector. My colleague Moses Jabati spoke about a nutraceutical sector. We believe that's a very, very important sector because it will allow us, I'm sure all of you have gone into places like Whole Foods and seen an abundance of coconut and soursop products and turmeric. Turmeric is chichima. So they're using our indigenous products and turning it into something, and we here just using it as bush medicine and not deriving it commercial value from it. The venom from our federal state, the most vile creature in St. Lucia, is selling for 250 grams, $250 a gram at the Kentucky reptiles because they believe that the venom from that snake has properties that can deal with some cardiac disease. We're not doing any research in that. We think we're sitting on a treasure trove of biodiversity resources, and we want to turn them down to economic opportunity. And I can tell you, if you look at the manifesto of the United Workers' Party, you see nothing at all resembling that. If you look at the manifesto of the United Workers' Party, you see nothing about correspondent banking. Correspondent banking is the biggest threat to the financial sector in St. Lucia right now. The entire financial sector is on the verge of collapse because of the de-risking that is taking place in banks who do not want to deal with our banks because they believe our banks are too risky. How can you say that you will run this country for the next 5 years and you don't even have your eye on the biggest issue affecting the financial sector? You know, that is nonsense if you do not deal with this correspondent banking issue. And we have an entire section in there talking about correspondent banking. So I will invite you. I know there are not many copies of the SLP Manifesto going around, so you may have to go online to get it. But go online, download it, everybody here will get a copy of ours, and look at the 2 manifestos. Many of the things in the SLP Manifesto is about continue. Now, continue our work. But who better to continue our work than the people who started it? So, I think you'll find that the choice is very clear. Read the 2 manifestos, look at the people, look at the teams in front of you, look at the stability of the teams in front of you, look at the vision of the leadership of the 2 teams, and get past the rhetoric. Just deal with the facts, deal with the experience, deal with the substance, deal with the track record. The last time the United Workers' Party put out its track record, we found that of the 26 things that promised, it had only achieved half of one of them, which was to reinstate the citizenship economy. What was our last manifesto? Blueprint for growth. And look at how many things we accomplished in there, and how many more things that were not in there that we accomplished. And you see, ladies and gentlemen, I said pledge. So, I have no doubt that on Monday, all of you will go to the polls and make the only decision that you can make, the choice that you can make, so that on Wednesday, many of us will be back and telling you how we plan to do it.
to tarnish that conclusion. Now it's your turn to ask questions. And can I make just a suggestion? Philip here has to go to Newspin for 1 o'clock. May I suggest that those of you who have questions, queries, or comments for him, that we take those now. Yes, sir? Philip? Yes. Who? Yeah.
First of all, the airport is being leased for 30 years. And after 30 years, it comes back to the government. Secondly, the reason why we took that position is because of the sheer cost of the debt that will be incurred on the public purse if we had gone through that large amount of capital expenditure. And thirdly, because of the transparency that we need in these kind of projects. If you know, airports are things that create a lot of excitement. You know the story about Trinidad. Airports generate because it's massive millions of money. So the Prime Minister wanted to ensure that his ministers or his cabinet will not in any way near that kind of revenue. Right? So we have absolute transparency. And fourthly, the management of the airports have become more than basically revenue taxpayers. They have become shopping areas, they become social areas, etc. So we thought we would get the best global management running it. And while they're doing that, they're trading solutions, training local staff, to take over when it happens. These are the reasons why we went down.
Is there any plans to have another construction stimulus like the last time? Because several of us, I mean, for young people in particular, the time frame will not allow us to tap into it. We need the time to put our deposit together and the long time it takes for the bank to approve our mortgages. It would be nice to have another stimulus, but one that would, like you would say, it would come in January. So at least we have the months to put out, get ourselves ready.
That's one of the what I think.
Thank you for that. There were a lot of misgivings when we started the construction stimulus program. But I think what actually happened is when it came to an end, that's when we suddenly got a flurry of applications and requests. Yes, it's something that we can think about. Now with the experience behind us, I think we're better able to think about it. But yes, it is something that we can think about. We have to look at all of it because of revenue leakage. But if we can make it otherwise, then we might be able to think about it. And I know the banks are a little tight now with lending for housing construction, so some encouragement is always useful. Yeah. Any other questions? Let's take a question.
Yeah, I just want to know the impact of this, the airport arrangement on the revenue of SLP.
That's a very good question. And there's a revenue sharing arrangement with SLP, which has been approved. There's a revenue share arrangement where SLP will share in the profits of the company and also share in revenue generated. So the revenue share arrangement between SLP and so SLP will continue to make revenue even though in other managing revenue to the facilities.
I don't also know that it's a first
Well, in terms of the government specifically treating people for the tourism industry, you know that there's a hotel training school, one, which does to particular level. What is happening is that the many solutions were owned through loans from the SLP, etc. They getting their own training to go to the industry. But what is most important in this story, the government will have that $3 million fund where people who can't afford it, who have the wherewithal to train themselves, then they can go into that fund and get trained.
They're qualified as a local part. But I don't think personal time you didn't mention the essential story of and the other person that is on the room, which I intend that we do reach significantly the proposals moving that forward from the personal. What is that? But the question I'm asking is that I believe that when that is done, we will have not significant personal life, for example, available for development. I just want to know what plan we are thinking at this stage that's probably can utilize that smart plan that the government is going to develop.
Thanks for that. I do remember, honestly, the flood mitigation studies in Manifesto. That actually is their conclusion. And what is happening now is the designs for intervention the designs for intervention, they are being done as we speak. That is a solution for that land that's available. I can't tell you from my head how we can do who's going to be industrial land. Because I just want to add, we've just got approval from OPIC to realign to resurface the highway and then join it to the junction that takes you up to Freeport. Right? So instead of coming down and going through to cul-de-sac, you will go across and get to the main junction through a roundabout. So you're going to open that whole area. Right now, when you come down the highway, within highway, you enter into cul-de-sac. Right? So you turn left if you want to go to Freeport Street, and then right into Suffolk Street. We're going to be roundabout right in the area where you're coming down from one and you turn left into Freeport. Or otherwise you're right there. So you're going to join the William Highway to a roundabout. It's going to be open.
We know that who's going taking over from there to the
And
in the 1990s, the design was to take that road on continuous road and take it straight to the gas station or some.
when I'm shopping in the plan, the computer complex. Yeah.
Okay. All right, can we let Philip go now? All right, Philip. Right, let's let the other questions roll, please. Any other questions for us? Yes?
I heard about what has been presented, which will help us long term.
No, can you repeat because I was far away. Generally
Sorry.
speaking.
Yes, I say that a lot of what has been said can help us long term.
Right.
But because of
Thank you. And you're right, because in the presentations we have had, we've not spoken about crime and justice. A couple of things. We remain very committed to establishing a tourism police unit. I can't remember the exact word that we used to describe it. Patrol the city center when our cruise ship visitors in and around, and of course other key strategic. In fact, we're working very closely with the SLP. The truth of the matter is, events have moved so quickly in the last couple of weeks. We haven't had a chance, and I think Salami will be very upset and angry with me, but we haven't had a chance to meet to discuss this innovation. So the government is committed to that. We have prepared all the reports and the assessment, and the intention is to establish these units in the city with police powers, so that they will take up a lot of the responsibility to police the areas, give them police powers, charge individuals, and assist the police generally. So that's one part. Some initiatives that we have on the way. One, we have to deal with the problems of the excess capacity, the excess number of remand prisoners. And this is so point, it's causing unnecessary tensions across the entire society, because the people being there 2, 3, 4 years waiting trial, which is very prejudicial to their trials they're supposed to go through. And we have started to work on that. We have only recently appointed additional judges specifically to try to deal with those numbers in there, so that we can find a solution to that. But it's not just a question of going through the individual cases. I think we have to handle group and cases a little differently. I have always felt, I have to confess, we were not able to do it as I had planned. I was hoping that some of those remand prisoners would go out on bail, for example. We did special tasks so that they can be identified as prisoners on bail in the society. The legislation, we did get the legislation out of Trinidad and Tobago, but we were not able to move in that direction. We have to take care of the judicial infrastructure of our courts, and I mentioned to you earlier on the need for us to build a new hall of justice. Is something that we have been delaying for a very long time, and we can't continue to operate the courthouse in the city. It's simply dysfunctional. The forensic research lab, we had a very unhappy experience with the forensic research lab. You're probably aware of it as much as I am aware of it. That is, the security of the lab was in fact compromised, and we went as far as cocaine being removed from the lab itself and being replaced by flour, which compromised in most cases. That's the real reason why the lab was not operating for a while. So we had to go through and review all the assessment of the person who were working and try to find out and pin down who in there was compromising the security of the lab. We have now moved to reactivate the lab. I think the lab is critical and crucial for us. But we are minded this time to bring in some external expertise to work with the lab, because there are huge problems even with the police in terms of handling forensic evidence. Some bizarre things are happening with evidence. I do not claim any I do not claim a plus for the cameras, CCTV cameras, and the form government standard. That has to go to that. We need to expand it, and in 1 or 2 cases, crimes have been resolved by the footage from the CCTV cameras. We want to extend that even further, not just in hotspots, but in an entire community. It costs a phenomenal sum of money, by the way, to pay for it. But given the number of successes we have had, we think it is vital now that we expand it throughout the entire island and not confined it to the state. One of the things we mentioned last night was we can use new and different technology, drones, to provide the police with capacity to use drones to be able to monitor some of the hotspots in and around the cities to get vital intelligence. And you may have heard me also announce last night that we're very concerned about the Chaussee area we're not operating on. There's not a position of prejudice to the residents there, because they're very decent, law-abiding persons in those communities. But they don't have a crush on the police. police easily available and we will be constructing our central police station in that area there to provide more security and help because of this. Overall, I would say to you, I know that each time and on the incidentally, where certain offenses are concerned, like rape, etc., sexual abuse, we will change the laws that is contrary to what we think. The law doesn't empower the courts to incarcerate somebody like imprisonment because of rape. Sentencing mechanisms are available for that. But one of the problems with prosecution in courts is that the rape victim is almost made to feel as she's the accused. But she's always put in the dock, ruthlessly cross-examined, ruthlessly interviewed because of this problem of cooperation, etc. So we want to revisit the evidential requirements of those victims so that it is far easier to secure convictions on these matters than has been the case. But that's not a substantive legal problem, it's actually a procedural problem. So some of these are some of the changes on the way. In conclusion, I know that each time you have a new crime, there's a lot of concern and anxiety. Something interesting has been happening in this course in the last couple of weeks. We're beginning to see a steady decline in major crimes. And we ask you why, the answer is very simple: intelligence. A lot of what's happening now driven by intelligence through a variety of means and mechanisms. So we're beginning to see the downward decline and we have to keep it up. Yes, ma'am? Somewhere in the manifesto, and I don't know whether Dr. Kircher is listening to me, we are making a proposal to change the planning process to shorten, if you can find it somewhere for me, Dr. Kircher, to shorten the decision-making process of planning down. One of them will tell me the exact page and I'll give you the reference. But the land registry is an issue and it's a problem. I did not want to tell you we have a chat. Did you get a reference? While you look at it, I'll take another question. Yep, let's go. Yes, sir? Right.
One of the things that we are
developer.
I'm indigenous science like myself who wish to
room for negotiation on this?
Of course, there's always room for negotiation on incentives. That's not an issue. But it's a little more tricky than you think. Governments have to really be ingenious because of all the external agreements that we have. We simply cannot identify nationals as entitled to specific concessions or privileges because we will be breaching our obligations to CARICOM and other international agencies. But we know the problem. And what we're trying to do is to be very ingenious in our approach to try to encourage the domestic sector. So for example, the simple will tell you, the Philippines will on you tell you, that we sometimes include in the decision regarding incentives that the developer will get additional incentives if he purchases his goods and supplies from St. Lucia. So these are the ways that we try to help out in addition to giving special support in processing, special support in terms of incentives. But we have to be very careful that we do not take these things in laws. I mean, within the next couple of years, the doors will be wide open in respect of Europe because the agreement that we have with Europe. And that's going to be a very tricky one to manage and to implement. And we are keeping the Europeans at bay. It's an agreement that was signed before my time, the EBA. I have issues with the EBA, but that's the agreement that is in place. But we have to, we are installing, and the Europeans quite ready to say, look, we have commitments that we need to keep. So it makes it a little more challenging. So while we are aware of the problem, we resort to our own ingenuity to ensure that we protect the best we do. But yes, incentives are always negotiable. Always. No, not on an individual needs basis in the sense that it's going to be specific to you. It's a question of what you request of the incentives because the law has to be fair in its application and what you can do to make maximum use of the incentives. Because sometimes if you allow us to guide you, we can show you what you can apply for, what you should apply for. Yes, next person, please. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I will. I promise. I promise. For you, I give you one.
You gave me one.
Yeah.
I have 3 questions.
You have 3.
All 3. When the time is right.
You add, okay, I'll take the second one and I'm going to come to you.
Right.
I apologize. Yes.
Okay, so I want
Who you want us to answer?
Well, doesn't matter, but it was geared towards Minister for this presentation.
Okay, Mrs. Hiblet.
Yes, okay, so as a young entrepreneur, okay, I see you notice that you create incentives to get into entrepreneurship, etc., etc. Now, this is all well and good. My question would be, so they are starting their own business, so how do you get them from point A to point B? Because I feel like, I mean, the Bell Fund is there, the ways for us to start up, and someone like myself, I am at point B and I'm trying to get to point. Yes, I am. I want to get to point B and a half. So you spoke a lot about manufacturing and standards, etc. But for my biggest issue is output. Output in the fashion industry and a lot of other creative sectors. Okay, I cannot find a skilled person to work with me. I've sent out my CVs and everybody, I get the same CVs, the same little class, certificates in data entry, blah, blah, blah. And they cannot even string together a sentence. So that if I even wanted a data entry book, I still would not hire them. I cannot get anybody to sort for me. I feel like the skill sets do not match what we are looking for. We hear about the investments, I heard about the hotels, that is fine. Is there any possibility that we can get a garment factory somewhere where designers can increase their output so that we can access the market? Because even if, I am an exporter, I export. But if somebody has to come to me now and say they want 200 bags from me, I can never produce that because I can't find a person with the skill set to do what I need them to do.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, but I also know that there's about 200 as the committee that you put together to sit, itemize the issues that you think that you need to deal with, and you come back with the ministry to say, these are the 6 things we want you help from the government with, and then we determine whether we can fund it from central government, or whether we need to work with you to prepare a grant proposal, or whether we have to work with the financial institution. We recognize the issues, and that is why we launched that regular establishment committee as we're coming at establishing, and that is what you're raising there is your homework we have to work with. Go and sit down. Go and sit down.
I understand
Go
that the
and
fashion
sit
council
down.
is focused on fashion.
No, it is not.
Yes. But, okay, I can understand the value-added services that are included in fashion, the photography, the makeup, I understand that section. But prior to the fashion council, I was part of a greater crafters association. That is where I am coming from. Okay, now I spoke about my specific experience that I can find a role, but I can speak to other crafters and porters and these sort of people who are not represented in the fashion council. And how can they increase their health? I'm just speaking in all the sectors in general.
We have formed trade solution. We have moved technical services to micro, small, all sectors, from Ministry of Commerce to Civil, Trade Export Promotion Agency that is focusing on the marketing, and others. My own ministry in terms of commercial sector. We have put that into one board. And what we're trying to do is to bring the technical persons together in committees and in groups. I expect your council, your committee, to sit down with the background experience that you have and the challenges that you have faced, to sit down, document it, you go into trade solution, you walk into trade solution now, whether you walk through it at Sable or you walk through it at the Kiva, and they will take it and they will try to address it. That is what it is. That is why we have not put civil servants on the committee. That is why we put practitioners, persons who are running a business and who have practices. Sit down, document your problems, say what they are, and will assist you in getting it to the bank.
So would there be other councils for the other sectors?
We will attempt to do so. If you sit down, when I mentioned at the evaluation of services, there is also a huge body there. And there are engineers there are every other thing within the evaluation of services. If there is a gap, then you have to identify it and then you respond to it. I also want to tell you that the new role that we're doing within the Small Business Development Center, we recognize that the work that is being done by academia, we're doing the work over there, and the manufacturers and the practitioners are over there. We have brought them in a few times, and we were not happy with the pace at which this happened. We should look it up to the needs of what's on the ground. The Prime Minister allowed me to go to California and Arizona just about the beginning of May to see what is happening at the University of Arizona and University University and the California University. We made significant contact. I came back even in the peak of my election campaign. I ensured we wrote the right reports. I ensured, in fact, I believe these people are having a Skype meeting. I brought the people, the director of the board of the Disaster Research College and the principal into my office with my technical staff and offloaded everything that we learned and picked up from Arizona and California and its heritage. We wrote the right letters immediately. We made the right connections. And as a result of that, for example, the first action was a Skype meeting with Qualcomm. And Qualcomm is one of the phone manufacturers that have all types of online trading and we went really in shape. And we started that process. So I'm just saying that one of the key things we want to do is to bring academia on to the work that is doing. You identify there's an issue, they go back and put a class thing for you, showing 6 people for you, and that is what was missing before. We recognize it was a gap, and now we are taking steps to close that gap. So you have to identify the gap that you have, and then we need to, is there need to identify an institution overseas where we can get some courses on tax
I promise you.
Academic qualifications without the practical skills. How will that be addressed? Because you represent in the chamber, I need to take back to the executive some comfort, especially the Training and Development Committee, as to what will be addressed. Because we do hire graduates from staff. I mean, I was very confident to know that staff will be a university college, and I like the fact that college was added after it.
Why is that?
I'm really got a misperception that it would be a university. Everybody says that when we study a platform to a university. I believe it's a misperception.
Sure.
I'm an education consultant and a business owner, so I understand both worlds. But what comfort would you give to the business community? That there would be a system in place, maybe from early childhood education through to tertiary education, that graduates would come out with two skill sets, academic and the practical skills. Thank you.
Good. It's really a powerful observation because we are experiencing severe problems in the public service. Solution now has one of the most decorated public services in the region. A lot of people with degrees and qualifications. But you know what's lacking in the public service? Leadership. You don't have leaders in the public service. What is happening is that we're promoting a lot of people on the basis of qualifications, but they can't manage people. They don't have a problem solving approach. They don't know how to relate to the clients of the various government departments. It's a serious problem. And sometimes you get accused of all kinds of things to promoting or holding the public service. It is not true. You are searching far and deep between to actually get solid individuals to put in key positions in public service. So what I raised is not as a problem in the private sector, the mismatch between qualifications and performance and skills, but it is an even deeper problem in the public service because you in the private sector can deal with it by termination. You have far easier modes of termination. We can't deal with it in the public service when you still be appointed because it's a torturous process. And no public service commission will accept the dismissal of public officer on the grounds of inefficiencies. It's something that you have to argue all the time. A couple of things though. One, we have to resolve that gap. At the level of the public service, we are creating a school of public service training. It will be a requirement eventually for entry into the public service that will undergo some program of training to prepare you for employment in the public service. You will be amazed by the fact that the government is often liable in damages for acts that public officers commit, not the politicians. The bill is huge, whether it is at a hospital or at institutions. It's a real problem. Because quite often they don't even know the laws of the country and what laws govern us, both constitutional and laws. Secondly, the issue with the private sector is a little more intractable and more difficult. I think really we have to explore synergy. For example, with the evolution of the art, we have heard of companies repeating. I think really what we have to do is to integrate as much as possible the private sector in the decision-making bodies of the college in terms of preparing the project. That is an issue at all. But there's something else that you may have heard me mention about. I'm very concerned about the skills of our ordinary employees. The world is changing so dramatically. The last couple of days, for some other reason, I look at myself, I'm 65 right now, and I'm beginning to wonder, well, if I survive up to the age of 72 next 7 years, what other changes in life that we have to prepare our workers for this moment. We have to mature them and we have to be skilled. And one of the things that the government has pledged to do is to introduce an in-house training program for all workers, all eligible workers, to be able to retool. This is something we have to work very closely with the private sector. Every worker in solution should have some modicum of training to manipulate a computer, get access to a computer, and to know how to use it. And they can do it, even if they may have no levels of education, because the evidence is there how they are manipulating their cell phones. But we can't continue with a workforce that is essentially so, that is untooled, or a workforce that has very limited skills. That's one of the things we want to do. We shall certainly be working with the private sector to do so that we can arrange a kind of training modules to introduce to the workers so we can get a far more sophisticated work. You know the big problem is solution of productivity. We are suffering. It's a huge, huge, huge problem. Our workers lack a lot of motivation, a lot of direction, and we need to cure that problem. In every single report on the solution, you can't even indicate that productivity is a drag on this economy we have to resolve. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
In light of the problem that you mentioned in the public sector,
Yeah.
what are the way that we have to
First of all, as I said to you, all intending public service, all intending public officers should undergo a period of training for entry into the public service. It also means that you have to continuously undergo training while you are in the public service. Because management skills, management techniques are changing. We really do no training at the senior level too. People come to positions largely by qualification and habit and practice what they have inherited. But there is nothing telling them how you expect them to perform. So Dr. Fletcher is now devising programs to do a lot of internal training of public officers. So you have to do it at both levels. The other factor is this. People have to be challenged to leadership. And I keep on saying that's the heart of our problem. Leadership. I'll give you some examples. We have entered into a rut in solution. We are taking ages to make very simple decisions about basic things. I have never seen a society that procrastinates like this. We have now become, we have got popular and overindulgence in checks and balances. What explains the fact? Don't get me wrong, I'm just giving it. What explains the fact that 4 years ago, the government decided that we need to bring government services to basic, and we need administrative office. It all is taking 4 years. Being that going up to 10. Designing the building, starting construction. You want another one? Look at the financial complex that NIC has built. The former government decided they're going to build a financial complex at Point 7. Okay? I get into office, we get into office, we decided not to disturb it, we go along with it. First day in office, sign off, torture, etc. Do you know that that complex is not completed? That what we are working now is an internal configuration. What is it about us that we cannot complete major projects quickly and on time? Now, I hear people quarreling about royalty because they are foreign workers with royalty. These things are always passionate. They're always passionate. There's 700 solutions that we working there, and there are about 5,300 non-nationals. The only reason why the non-nationals were brought in is because the techniques of building, we didn't have it. And Royalton was under pressure to try and complete the building in November. So So they needed a massive workforce, but they needed technology that was easy for that. Can you have an example that within a year and a half, a huge hotel is going up and likely to open, from what I gather, almost on time? Why then are we in the public service taking 5-6 years to put up a building? Why? Why is that happening? And we have now developed a culture of procrastination in decision making. Too many checks and balances for simple, ordinary things. That if you had the right people in leadership positions, it would occur. People often blame politicians, but I assure you the problem is not there. It is the very civil servants who are challenged with responsibility. If you want, I give you another example. 4 years ago, we decided that we were going to construct a new health center for the people of Ansbury County. 4 years. And you know that that health center is only now being prepared for possible construction. 4 years. How could it be justified? So it's a problem of leadership that we have to fight the culture of procrastination. And as I said to you, I don't know what has happened. We have become so sensitive, we are going backwards in time now to be overcautious about making decisions. Errors will be made in decision making. Unfortunately, some of them can be very costly. Some of them can be very costly, but yet we have to understand that sometimes we do not take risks. Yes, sir.
Question about tourism and concerns.
Tourism, let me ask Ernest to take that
Transportation
one.
providers.
Let's see if Ernest can handle it for you.
So it's a two-part question. One is, are there any intentions or how can we deal with political integration in the accommodation sector or to continue the trend of it? Where we've seen in the past vendors or photo shops that have been pushed out, we're now seeing a lot of the tour operators getting pushed out because of buying their own boats. Licenses to dive, sunset cruises, deep sea fishing, everything else. So balancing the need to attract investment and keep investment, but also to protect the local interests. And two, international charters are renting offshore, but they're renting to individuals who are then using it to do tours, which is illegal practice. Is there anything being looked at on that?
Actually, you mentioned something that is in the manifesto. We recognize that it's critical for us. We are going to maximize benefits for all the foreign investment that we speak of, that there is integration in the linkages area for us. And we're absolutely right. In our own reflections, looking at the present system, we recognize the need for a greater focus on ensuring integration. It's something that has been discussed. I think, though, we need to have greater stakeholder involvement in the discussions. But some of them are very sensitive, and you actually give examples that are difficult. I must say, for example, when we were discussing the Shabutra investment, the one point that we made and reinforced with the investor is that whatever hotel that is built, it must be built on the heritage and the legacy of Suzanne, the craftsmen, the whole history of Suzanne as a craft destination. And therefore, if they were going to be part of the same game, they wanted the concession that they wanted, they had to give an assurance that they were going to integrate Suzanne and its craft heritage within the design of the hotel. And when all of us come out, you will notice that in the hotel is a craft artist market created for all the Suzanne crafts people to be located in the hotel as part of a communal setting. To be able to bring back to the community. And I think moving forward, as we grant incentives and concessions to hoteliers, we will have to engage in that kind of discussion. Wherever you are putting up development, you have to have a discussion with us as to how you will integrate the community, as well as ensuring that solutions that participate in specialized areas of activity are not, shut off. We do not think the best way to go forward for hotel to services or charter services, because it makes sense when we are shutting down small entrepreneurs from entering and actually benefiting. So we don't want a situation where we have hotel is $200 million. And when you do an impact study of the investment in the country, you realize a very small percentage of it actually filtered to the society, or in its operation, a very small percentage is enjoyed by the rest of the population. And I think we've already started discussing that. It is not easy because the Prime Minister will probably tell you the pressures he gets from hoteliers and from a wide range of concessions that they want to make a decision to come to St. Lucia. But I think if we become a preferred investment destination, it strengthens our hand. We're going to say to investors, you're going to come to our country, these are some guidelines we want to consider during our negotiations.
They just ask for some guidance more towards those that are already there. Because we have those that are coming in, granted there's something to that, but the ones that are there are the ones that are no longer using local English anymore and looking to do it themselves. So you have a person who's invested years and hundreds of thousands in their own business to buy a boat, to buy a tour guide, to buy a helicopter, but yet this hotel now is coming in and they push it to their English now and they're down and that person decides to leave. That person is no longer there to provide that service, and our island has big problems.
We had a little information in the specifics of particular hotels that in relevance, probably inappropriate to do that and going forward. I'm sure after June 6th, there can be specific discussions about experiences that need to be addressed.
Okay, next question.
I'm not sure who's to be to answer my question, but I need to take it back to information. As Terry had mentioned, yes, there is staff when it comes to assistance and certain aspects of our business. But my question in general is, how, because I skimmed through the manifesto and I see that it was encouraged persons to be able to go into what according to athletes say, and I'm sure having spoken to them, is that there seems to be a gap between entrepreneurs who need help, who need guidance, who need mentoring, and the established businesses or persons who are established entrepreneurs. So what sort of idea, incentives, or assistance can you help us with partnering us with persons who know what they're doing, know what risks to take, know what avenues to explore, who can advise us? Because I've been fortunate to work in the industry that have made those connections, but I know there are a lot of people out there who are just lost and they're not sure. And small business development cannot help or see through. It's really about being next to or being guided by some individual who knows how to maneuver towards the problems we met. So is there any sort of plan or any sort of something in the making that can help us with that?
Thank you. I actually remember the section in the manifesto where it says, although this is that's not my section, I'm stepping out of my section. But on page 25 of the manifesto that we get in a while, there are actually two lines I think that speak directly to what they've asked. One is to introduce the National Export Advisory Service and volunteer technical assistance program to increase the level of technical expertise available to migrants or enterprises. But the more relevant one that you asked is really introduce a business internship program and mentorship program for micro and small enterprises. Augment the human resource capacity, improve productivity and entrepreneurship. You're right, I mean, it really makes more sense having people on the England and there are many people who learn this before, not just in regionally and internationally. And it doesn't take much to do it for South Cooperation. You can do it for making contact with many of these countries with which we have a diplomatic relationship and get them to come in and assist us. So that is something that can very easily be achieved. It certainly is something that is implemented. I'm sure the next Minister of Responsibility of this section, right in London, before you do that, I just want to respond to one thing about public service. I think one of the frustrations people have about public service, if you look at public service center, if you are looking for, let's assume you want to be something, there are so many different agencies you have to get the permits, to get information about you that the public service already has on you. I mean, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous that you have to go to the police for the reason. Then you have to go to the Ministry of Trade. Then you have to go to somewhere else. All the public services have to do is to get you to verify that you are who you say you are. So if your name is Sanofi Destan and you come and you say my name is Sanofi Destan, we verify that you are Sanofi Destan and then you come back in a week's time and we will mine all the information we have on you from the various agencies and tell you that in 1 week's time you will get information. We should not be sending you from one page to another to collect information on you that they are. But the reason that is happening is each of these agencies have their own discrete databases that they're not sharing with each other. So somebody has to send you to do the work that the public service should be doing for itself. And that is why we have invested so much money in networking, in digitization. Because we believe when we do that, then we will make life a lot easier for you. So it's not just the personnel, it's the structures in the service that are just not designed for efficiency. And that's one of the things that my industry has worked very diligently on. Because people is one thing, but if you don't have the right systems in place, you can't deal with it. So I just thought I should.
So to add to what Jimmy has said, what I want to inform within Ease of Doing Business task force, we have an exercise ongoing now where we are mapping the processes, investment processes throughout the system. We are mapping it first, and then we are going to see how we can improve. We can only improve it because the steps are not documented. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You know, in private sector, you have a manual. These are the 10 things, these are the 10 steps to the PMC. In the private sector, in our system, it's not documented. And you have one person who sits at that desk for 20 years and he walks out tomorrow. And then there's trouble. And that is a challenge in civil service. The documentation of processes. And after it is documented, and where it is documented, the public is not aware of it. So that person who's sitting at that desk is king because he has all this information in his head. And that is the challenge that we have. So we are mapping the processes, and also after we map it, we try to tell them, okay, immediately you map that process, put it on the website so the public is aware that to get a driver's license you have these 3 steps. I think that is where we are in that. So that's important. But as it relates to the question that was raised in entrepreneurship, in addition to all what we're doing now, the SBDC model, there is a system called NeuroSaver. And that system allows you to use a system that we have purchased on the license. And that system allows you when you become a member, like the minute you become a member of the SBDC family, you start getting yourself letters out generators. So you start meeting suppliers that are interested in your product, you start meeting persons who are interested in purchasing your product, and you start exchanging. You have an opportunity as well to exchange information with these persons. In addition to that, we've started discussion a while now with the Chamber of Commerce so that you have a mentoring program. Those businesses that are experienced business persons are very to buy and before. That's an area that we need to continue, where we have a mentoring program. So you're a new entrepreneur, then you could be linked to an experienced entrepreneur, and so therefore, legal practical issues, you can call and say, I have this challenge, how do you think we can do it?
Okay, that's it. Can we take the last one? I think you had talked that this election is close, so it is close. And we have to get the last one.
Alongside the programs where
Right.
a lot of them get tied to when it comes to how organization is starting. And maybe businesses they are just what goes in that is like taxing or doing something on how can we start getting the facilities of my time cameras and whatnot. There's going to be only items standardized. How do you
Very
tell them
good.
the
Very good. The first thing is that most of you will qualify as small businesses. There's a small business act that grants concessions in these matters. important to have a union within the industry that can help you set up a company, because quite often we take that giant step into business. A lot of people love to use business names. The business names can only take you so. What you need to do is to set up a company. And it's easy these days, because you don't need very many directors, but you need a legal personality. And if, of course, you're venturing into that area, you can craft a private concession. And I've always been cabinet minister to be very generous to concessions for small businesses. So let's take a walk into the Ministry of Commerce and they can give you some good advice that you want to love here. Thanks. Also, the lawyer's office is ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for turning up. I want to thank you for having this kind of us. I think Lauren had this encounter with you, this engagement with you. I hope you now have a lot to think about. You take the first step and just think about the things that you have done today. I'll be satisfied if you do that. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
And before you go, we do have copies of the manifesto.
Oh yeah, you know, get a copy of the manifesto as proof that you were here, as well as